Hello and welcome to the Connecting Minds podcast. Thank you for joining me. My name is Christian Yordanov. Today I have a treat for you. I have David Tomen on the podcast and we talk about all things nootropics. If you don't know what nootropics are, they're basically compound supplements that we can use to boost and optimize our brain function. And David is an expert on nootropics, hence why his website is called nootropicsexpert.com. We talk about a ton of really awesome compounds from L-tyrosine to alpha-GPC, CDP choline, acetyl-l-carnitine, taurine, the racetams like piracetam, aniracetam, a ton of other stuff, right? So there's a lot of really useful information if you're getting started with nootropics. We cover a lot of the really fundamental core things that you need to do to get right in order to maximize your investments from these compounds, right? As you will see, David is just a fountain of knowledge on this topic. It's personally one of my favorite topics, which is why I was so excited about this interview. And I'm hoping to get him on the podcast again. So if you like what you hear today, let me know if you want us to cover any specific topics. For example, how to boost focus or nootropics for anxiety, things like that, right? Let me know. And I'll have links, of course, to David's resources. You really ought to check out his website and his YouTube channel. He has a book as well called Head First, which I'm just about to buy. It's nearly a 600-page book on basically nootropics, right? All things nootropics. So a huge reference. And his website has information on about 95 of the best, most popular nootropic compounds. And I'm kind of proud to say that I've tried about almost 70 of them. So you can probably tell I am really into this topic. And I feel like a lot of you listening will get a lot of value out of this because our brain health and performance should not really diminish as we age. We have the tools and the knowledge to optimize our brains and have them working really well for a very long time, well into our 80s, 90s. It's a real shame to see people say, oh, I'm getting old, I'm starting to forget things. My brain isn't as good as it used to be. Well, it's because you didn't know how to take better care of it, right? And this particular episode lays a lot of the groundwork on how to better take care of your brain, right? So very important topic, a vast topic. So we only scratched the surface here, but I think if you're a beginner, you will get a ton of value out of this. So I hope you enjoy this interview. And without further ado, I present to you David Tomen.
Connecting Minds is a space dedicated to honoring the amazing authors, researchers, clinicians, artists, and entrepreneurs who are contributing to our collective evolution or simply making the world a better place. These thought-provoking conversations are intended to expand our horizons, so come with an open mind and let us grow together. Here is your host, Christian Yordanov.
Alrighty, today on the Connecting Minds podcast, I have the pleasure of interviewing Mr. David Tomen. David, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Christian. Good to be here.
I just wanted to start recording because you were about to kind of tell me a little bit about how your website, nootropicsexpert.com, came to be. So can you maybe tell our listeners first of all, what are nootropics? How did you discover them? And, what was your journey with them? And how did that lead you to creating this amazing resource that you have at nootropicsexpert.com, please?
Okay. I kind of stumbled onto nootropics about 13 years ago, but I did not know that they were called nootropics at the time. I have suffered with focus problems all of my adult life. I mean, I've been to 45 countries, and I've lived in several countries, and wherever I ended up in an executive position for some big company. And my performance review every year would be, David, you're a fantastic manager. You're a really good executive. You're fantastic with people. You're a good salesman, but you got to learn how to focus, right? Every single year, man. So I went out and I bought the books, and I bought the books on management, and I try as hard as I could not fix this problem. I thought it was a moral failing. And then about 15 years ago, I was living in Miami, and I met this beautiful blonde on the beach, and we ended up getting married 6 months later. And within the first year of our being together, she saw what was going on, and she introduced me to this rock star. I call him a rock star psychiatrist up in Palm Beach. He's one of these doctors that are like so far at the top of their field that they're in the stratosphere, because this guy sat me down, and within 10 minutes he had diagnosed me adult ADD and PTSD.
Wow.
Yeah. And it took me another 10 or 12 years to figure out where I think the PTSD came from. But for ADD, he prescribed Ritalin. And Ritalin, or methylphenidate, is just a dopamine reuptake inhibitor. As soon as I started using Ritalin, my brain started working. It was like somebody turned the lights on in my brain. And all of a sudden, for the first time in my adult life, I could focus. I mean, it was a miracle. But within a couple of years, I started growing tolerant to Ritalin. And I panicked, because I'm going, finally, after all these years, I finally found something that worked, and it's going to stop working. I don't think so. So I decided to find out how methylphenidate worked in the human brain. And I found out that it was a dopamine reuptake inhibitor. And so I'm going, okay, if that is a dopamine, so that must mean that maybe I don't have enough dopamine in my brain. How do I fix that? I found out that L-tyrosine was a precursor to the synthesis of dopamine. And I've also learned that in the ADD brain and ADHD brain cell signaling is a problem too. And that's dependent on acetylcholine. How do I raise that? I found out that alpha-GPC or CDP-choline were precursors to acetylcholine. And so I went to the local vitamin shop here, and I got some L-tyrosine, I got some alpha-GPC, I got some acetyl-l-carnitine, which is a cofactor in the synthesis of acetylcholine. And I started using these supplements, and all of a sudden Ritalin started working again. And I found that because I was on instant release Ritalin, it would only last for, like, my morning dose would only last to about noon. So I'd have to take another dose for the afternoon. So I had to dose these supplements each time I took Ritalin, so that my brain had enough acetylcholine and dopamine so that Ritalin had something to work with. But I found that if I took a dose in the morning and another at noon, when the Ritalin wore off around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I crashed. But I found that if I took the same stack that I was taking at noon, again at 4 o'clock, when there was no more Ritalin left in my system, I didn't crash.
Interesting.
So that was my introduction to, that's when I learned that there were dietary supplements that can easily be bought on any vitamin shop or health food store that helps the brain. And then, this was about 7 years after that, I got desperately sick. I mean, so sick that I wanted to die. And it got so bad one day that my wife took me to the ER because she thought I was having a heart attack. And it turns out it wasn't a heart attack. My heart was fine. They diagnosed me hypothyroid. For some reason, just out of the blue, I became severely hypothyroid. And one of the symptoms of hypothyroidism, just to cut this story short, is memory loss. And my memory loss was so bad, Christian, that I went to 2 different neurologists that tested me for Alzheimer's.
Wow.
And both came up. I got 30, the way they score to find out if you've got Alzheimer's or dementia, there's a scoring system, and I got a perfect score. So they're going, you haven't got Alzheimer's and you haven't got dementia. We're sorry, but I can't help you. We don't know why you can't remember anything.
Oh my God.
So once again, I was on my own. And by this time, I had started during this time, I'd been running a local marketing company. And when I got really, really sick, I couldn't do that big of a job helping all kinds of marketing for all kinds of businesses. So I decided to focus on one thing, and I picked copywriting, and I just started writing sales copy. And so at the time, I had started writing. Not too long after that, I found, first of all, so I started writing sales copy, but to fix my brain, I found out that I was on my own again, because why was there, what causes memory loss from hypothyroidism? And there were no books on the subject. There were no websites on the thing. I mean, I was on my own again. And I ended up in places like PubMed and just reading clinical study after clinical study after clinical study to find out something that worked. And finally, I learned enough that I put together a stack, and I started to get my memory back.
What was that stack?
I'm sorry?
Out of curiosity.
It's the stack it's the stack that I'm using now.
Right.
The stack that I'm using now, it's on the website. It's called What I Take, I think.
Oh, I've seen that actually.
It's a tab up in the main menu. A while ago. So it's about half a dozen different supplements, and I got my memory back. But one thing I realized when I was doing this was that if I'm having such a problem trying to do this, and I'm a really good researcher, and when you're writing direct response copy, you have to know how to research. The average person on the street was lost. I mean, if they were suffering from anxiety or depression or ADD or hypothyroidism or whatever, they had no chance of fixing their own brain because there was no information out there. Yeah. And that's when I realized that the world needed one authority, like a website, to just research all of these supplements. And so far I've done deep dives into 95 or 96 individual supplements that help the human brain somehow. And I started writing copy for Nootropics Expert, and it grew from there, and here we are. But that's how it came to resource. Be. And I came to that realization when I was writing some sales copy for a supplement company in England. I was writing advertorials for a nootropic stack, and that's when it finally hit home that the problem that I had trying to find out this information on my own, I was having the same problem when I was trying to write sales copy. I was getting all this stuff from places like PubMed and Nature and PLOS One, and where they publish these clinical studies, right? Nobody had written any books. The last book that was written on nootropic supplements was published in 1992.
Wow.
That's a long time ago.
A bit further in the research since then.
Yeah. I mean, neuroscience is changing by leaps and bounds every single month. Yeah. So anyway, that's how Nootropics Expert came to be, and I just started writing, and that was late 2015, I think. And I've got 2 books out now, and I've got a YouTube channel that has got, I kind of lost track, 65 or 70,000 subscribers or something.
Wow, geez, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I have not actually seen your YouTube channel yet, but I will definitely be checking it out, because this is one of my favorite areas. It's not just nootropics, but supplementation in general. And I'll definitely be purchasing your books, because it's just nice. I just bookmarked your big list of nootropics, the 95 nootropics that you have there. I have it on my, my tabs there, my shortcuts, because it's a great reference for folks, and I will definitely have the links in the show notes. And as a quick aside, I went through the 95, the big list of nootropics. I went through the 95, and I have taken about 65 of those on your list. So
yeah. I've tried most of the supplements on that list. Wow. I don't take them all now, but I've tried most of them just to find out what they do.
Yeah, I figure I'm very curious like that as well.
Yeah, if I'm going to recommend them to somebody, I want to find out how this thing works and what it feels like.
100%. So, So let's get into the actual supplements. What would you let's take a theoretical person. Okay, I'll give you some pretty broad parameters, but let's say someone between the ages of 30, 50, 60. Let's say they have some type of office job, so mental work. um their diet, lifestyle, nutrition is not necessarily really well dialed in. But how would you approach a person like that wants to optimize their brain function?
I would find out first what they're trying to fix. And because I run into this over and over again when people come to nootropics expert, they say, give me a pill that'll help me, that'll fix my brain. And one thing that I found is there's no one pill solution. It takes several different supplements to fix something. And the other thing is you really have to know what you want. To make your job easier on trying to figure out what supplements will work for you is first figure out what you're trying to fix.
Right.
And so is it like processing speed and decision making and focus and flow and thinking? Or is it learning and memory? Or is it anxiety and depression? Or is it energy and motivation? Or is it brain repair and maintenance for some reason? Like you got whacked on the head. So I get a person to focus on just one thing first and fix one thing, and then we can start tweaking it and working on other stuff. But that's the easiest way to approach this.
Right.
Because there's very specific supplements that help things like learning and memory, and very specific supplements that help things like motivation, and very specific supplements that help things like energy, and very specific supplements that help things like brain repair.
Right.
And maintenance. So does that answer your question? That's how I approach it when I'm talking to people.
Yeah, it does. So let's say we have a programmer, coder, codes 8-10 hours a day. So
Yep.
I suppose learning and memory is important because they're constantly keeping up to date with the latest frameworks and things like that. But they also need to context switch between, let's say, a bug or whatever, building a feature. So I suppose processing speed is important.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you approach that type of problem? I mean, I wouldn't call it a problem, but let's say goal in this instance.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. It could be something that you're trying to optimize.
Right.
I mean, you could be a perfectly healthy person and still want to optimize your brain.
Absolutely.
Well, we know that processing speed and decision making and focus and flow and thinking depends on things like acetylcholine and L-tyrosine and dopamine. Those are the two basic ones.
So those are the neurotransmitters.
Those are mostly neurotransmitters. Although the health of individual brain cells is important too. Because for these neurotransmitters, you need to be able to make these neurotransmitters. But your brain cells also have to be in good condition so that brain cell signaling works, especially when it comes to processing speed and decision making and flow and that kind of thing. Because stuff has to be able to get in and out of brain cells, right?
Right.
You've got billions and billions and billions of brain cells in your skull. And each one of those brain cells has got a membrane around it. And that membrane is made up of DHA, phosphatidylserine, and phosphatidylcholine. And if you are deficient in any one of these phospholipids, that brain cell membrane starts to get hard. In other words, it loses its permeability, and stuff can't get in and out easy.
Right.
And what the result of that is, your thinking speed slows down, your decision making suffers. You can't go into flow. So what we need to do is we need to rejuvenate or keep those brain cell membranes supple so that neurotransmitters can do their job. And we do that by using phospholipids like DHA, or phosphatidylserine is one super powerful supplement. So DHA comes from omega-3? Yeah. It comes originally from algae. And so I recommend that a person take 1,000 milligrams of DHA every day in the morning, not fish
Mhm.
oil, and not just any old
And why not
omega-3.
fish oil?
There's a number of reasons. One is if you're getting a fish oil supplement, there's a problem with purity,
Mhm.
for one thing. And the other one is you need DHA more than you need EPA.
Right.
Your brain is about 60% fat, and most of that fat is DHA.
Right.
And the studies that I've seen indicate that each of us need a minimum of 1,000 milligrams of DHA every day.
Mhm.
And so if you just go to the vitamin store and get yourself a fish oil supplement, you're probably going to end up with 100 or 200 milligrams of DHA. You're going to have to take a lot of fish oil to get that amount
Yeah.
of DHA. So it's better to get a DHA supplement.
Mhm.
And they're few and far between, but there is some on the market that have a DHA supplement will provide in 1 or 2 gel caps 1,000 milligrams of DHA and about half that in EPA. You
Right.
still need the EPA because EPA influences things like serotonin and mood. So you need the EPA, but you need DHA more than you need EPA.
I see.
And
And I
one
think
doesn't
it's
turn
the
into the
opposite
other.
in fish oil. EPA is the higher part of the
Correct.
ratio, isn't it?
And most
Mm.
omega-3 supplements are like that too.
Yeah.
They've got a higher, because when they're manufacturing these things, it's cheaper to manufacture it like that and it smells better. If you've got
Mm.
more DHA than EPA in a supplement, unless it's made from algae, it's going to smell more fishy,
Right. Of course.
right? So it's not as saleable. It's not as appealing to the consumer. But don't forget that fish and all seafood get their omega-3s from algae.
Mhm.
We don't get omega-3s from fish. We get omega-3s from fish that get their omega-3s from algae. So we kind of
Interesting.
we skip the middle fish or skip the middleman,
Yeah.
and preferably a supplement that's made from algae
Interesting. I like that.
or something like krill
Okay. So
is okay.
how is, I know krill is high in phospholipids. Is that one
Yeah.
of the
Phospholipids are closer to what our brain is already using because
Mhm.
it's phospholipids that we're talking about. Because DHA is working with the other phospholipids, phosphatidylserine, phosphatidylcholine, right?
And is there any dietary sources of phosphatidylserine? Would you know?
There is, and the one that comes to mind is soy.
Soy.
But I prefer getting phosphatidylserine from sunflower because I try to avoid soy because it's not terribly good for the human
Absolutely.
body.
Absolutely. So sunflower lecithin, or is that what we're talking
Sunflower
about?
lecithin, that's right.
Okay.
And you can't do this with a lecithin supplement either.
It has to
I
be
hear this
sunflower.
quite often. People say, well, can't I just use soy lecithin and do this? No. It's
Okay.
derived from lecithin, but it's a very specific supplement.
Interesting. I will definitely be getting some sunflower lecithin then.
So
Thank you.
just a kind of like an amusing aside here, phosphatidylserine was originally made from cow brains. But with the mad cow disease scare, PS supplements are now made from extracts of soy or sunflower lecithin.
Interesting. Man, you've already like if we stop this episode here, this already will be so much value to people. I'm loving it.
Let's talk about phosphatidylserine for a minute. Phosphatidylserine is one of the phospholipids that make up brain cell membranes.
Mhm.
But when I'm reviewing each of these supplements, one of the things that I like to do is how does something feel? Like you can do what do the studies show, what do the clinical research shows, you can get into the microbiology of it, but what does it actually feel like when somebody uses it, right?
Yeah.
And so at that stage, this is how does phosphatidylserine feel? I go to things like Amazon reviews for the best-selling phosphatidylserine supplements.
Mm,
or to Swanson or to iHerb, someplace where there's a lot of reviews for a particular supplement. And this is what I
right.
found for phosphatidylserine. Neurohackers report that using phosphatidylserine as a nootropic boosts energy levels, it improves alertness, there's less brain fog, better memory, logical thinking improves, concentration is better, clarity of thought, weight loss, it's easier to remember names, phone numbers, and tasks, etc. Mood
Wow.
improves, it's anti-anxiety, it lowers cortisol, it relieves insomnia, and you get vivid dreams.
Wow. Okay.
That's one
That's gone.
supplement. Isn't that
That's going
crazy?
to the top of my list. Yeah.
And you need like 100 milligrams 3 times a day.
Okay. Okay.
So some consider that the best nootropic on earth.
Wow.
And it's kind of hard to argue that it's not really, really important, because it is.
Okay. What else would you rank high in terms of important? Let's say if I told you can only take 5 things for the rest of your life, I'm sure phosphatidylserine would be one of them. But what else would make that list?
For me personally, and probably for most healthy adults, L-tyrosine,
Okay.
which is a precursor to the synthesis of dopamine. AlphaGPC, which is a precursor to the synthesis of acetylcholine. Acetyl-l-carnitine, which is a cofactor in the synthesis of acetylcholine. And a really high quality B complex. And DHA.
Okay. So a couple of questions there. So, first of all, how would you differentiate between L-tyrosine and acetyl-l-tyrosine? I
That's
know
a
you
great
have
question.
acetyl. Yeah, I know, because I know in that's. Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, N-acetyl-L-tyrosine was developed because they wanted to make L-tyrosine, the supplement, more bioavailable, so that's easier to cross the blood-brain barrier. So they added an acetyl group to it, and
Right.
that's what it's called, N-acetyl-L-tyrosine. And when you take it as a supplement, it just turns into L-tyrosine once it gets through your digestive system. But what
Right.
they found in clinical studies was it doesn't necessarily work any better than L-tyrosine. And in fact, that you urinated it out a lot quicker in that form that you did if you took it as L-tyrosine. And so when people ask me that question, I just recommend that they try both of them. Try L-tyrosine for a month and try N-acetyl-L-tyrosine for a month, and find out which one works best for you. Some people find that one works better than the other. I personally have found that I can use either one, and it works equally well. So it depends on the person and their system.
Now, I think we need to underscore the importance of. I like that you had B vitamins so high up, because out of nearly 100 compounds, you had a simple, quote unquote B vitamin complex. Can you tell folks why are B vitamins so important to take daily?
This could be a whole podcast on its own. You'll find, if you do a search of Nootropics Expert, you'll find 13 vitamins essential for the optimized brain. And I've listed everything from vitamin A to vitamin K. And so let's just talk about the B vitamins themselves. Vitamin B1, or thiamine, is directly involved in the citric acid, or the Krebs cycle, that provides adenosine triphosphate energy within your mitochondria. And it's absolutely critical for the synthesis of acetylcholine.
Right.
If you don't have enough thiamine in your system, you cannot make acetylcholine. And even mild thiamine deficiency can turn your world completely upside down. So a lot of people find that if you use thiamine as a supplement, it boosts attention, energy, and motivation. There's a reduction in brain fog, along with increased mental clarity, and there's less anxiety. That's just with one vitamin, one B vitamin, which I find kind of incredible. While we're on the subject of thiamine, though, it's important to note that there was a big problem with a disease called beriberi in the early 1900s in Japan, because because of the economics at the time, people were eating white rice, and they were extremely thiamine deficient, and they developed beriberi. which is a disease. And so the scientists at the time knew that thiamine deficiency was behind this, but they found that just supplementing with thiamine was not solving the problem with severe thiamine deficiency because it has a hard time crossing the blood-brain barrier. So they developed a supplement called salbutamine. Actually, it was a drug at the time. Now we can use it as a supplement, but it's a fat-soluble synthetic version of thiamine, which is much more bioavailable. It easily crosses the blood-brain barrier, and all it is two thiamine molecules bound together.
Interesting.
And that's the one that I use, 400 milligrams a day.
Vitamin.
Vitamin B2 or riboflavin is required to produce the pyridoxic acid from vitamin B6, which is a form of B6 that your body can actually use. And it's required to convert vitamin A, retinol, to retinoic acid that your body can use. And it's required to convert tryptophan to vitamin B3 or niacin. Speaking of niacin, vitamin B3. Vitamin B3 is required to catabolize fats, carbohydrates, proteins, and alcohol. It's involved in cell signaling and DNA repair. It helps convert NADH into the primary carrier of electrons that transfer food from your diet into energy that's stored as adenosine triphosphate. And it boosts the production of nitric oxide, which relaxes your blood vessels and increases blood flow, like cerebral blood flow. Right. It also acts as an antioxidant, which helps eliminate free radicals that can damage brain cells. And it is a cofactor in the production of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. Vitamin B5, pantothenic acid. It is essential for the synthesis of acetylcholine. You cannot make acetylcholine without vitamin B5.
Yeah.
It's also used to make adenosine triphosphate. It's involved in the Krebs cycle within mitochondria. It's a precursor to the synthesis of coenzyme A, which is involved in the synthesis of the neurotransmitters acetylcholine, epinephrine, and serotonin. Vitamin B6 is a required enzyme for the synthesis of dopamine, epinephrine, GABA, melatonin, norepinephrine, and serotonin. Vitamin B7 or biotin influences the use of branched-chain amino acids in the synthesis of the release of serotonin from tryptophan and tyrosine from phenylalanine. And as a coenzyme, it's required for the synthesis of fatty acids for the energy production in your brain. Vitamin B9, folate. This is a really important B vitamin. It functions as a coenzyme in the single carbon transfers into the synthesis of DNA and RNA, and it converts homocysteine to methionine, which is used in the synthesis of SAMe. Folate is also involved in gene expression, amino acid synthesis, myelin synthesis, and it's required for the synthesis of dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. Vitamin B12, or methylcobalamin, is a cofactor in the synthesis of dopamine, GABA, norepinephrine, and serotonin. That's the reason why these B vitamins are so critical. If you're lacking any one of these B vitamins, you got problems.
Yeah, and I think it was for B1 or B2, did you say that it's required for the conversion of B6 into the usable form in the body? So the point there is being deficient in one B vitamin can actually cause deficiencies in other B vitamins. That's why they're so important to take as a B complex. And because I know a lot of folks that just take a folate or just a B12, and taking high doses of B12 on their own can actually cause quite a significant imbalances in, I think it was in the transsulfuration pathways, in the methylation pathways as well.
It messes up methylation.
Yeah.
I recommend that people get a really high quality multivitamin that uses bioactive forms of each of the vitamins and minerals. And as you get older, it helps also to use a B complex. like a really highly bioactive B complex. One of the things that you got to watch out for in these vitamins is when you go into the vitamin shop. You can go to your local supermarket, for heaven's sakes, to buy vitamins. Right? They're all over the place. Most of them are synthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, folic acid or folate. Most multivitamins that you pick up off the shelf in the supermarket or at your local pharmacy, and you turn it around, you look at the supplement facts label. The quickest way to judge the quality of a multivitamin or a B complex supplement is what kind of B9 is in there. If it's folic acid, put it back on the shelf. If it's folate or methylfolate, that's a winner. That's a keeper, because chances are the rest of the supplement is also bioactive.
Yep.
The problem with folic acid is it's in everything. It's in processed foods. It's in baby food. It's in everywhere you look. There is folic acid. And so we are overrun with folic acid in a lot of the food that we eat. And the idea is that our bodies can easily convert folic acid into methylfolate that our bodies can use. Yeah. The problem is that does not happen for a lot of people, like me. I can't convert the stuff. And so what happens is folic acid just goes in and it plugs up folate receptors. It occupies folate receptors so that when you actually get real folate has got nothing to bind to.
Yeah. You know,
right?
I'm so glad you brought this up, because I just finished a video course for parents for choosing high quality supplements for their children. And this is something I really harped on, about the importance of picking multivitamins with methylcobalamin as the B12 and methyltetrahydrofolate as the folate. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I'm going blue in the face harping on about this, but it cannot be, emphasized enough. So I'm glad.
I agree with you 200%.
Awesome.
There's so much garbage out there in the supplement market.
You literally just quoted what I said in my course. This was my warning to parents. Be careful. There's so much garbage out there. That's exactly
there really
what I said.
is, because it's easy to get into the supplement business, and it's easy so when you go to their supermarket or you go to your local pharmacy, they've got white label. They've got Walgreens has got their name on a supplement bottle. Your local supermarket has got their name on a supplement bottle. I guarantee you, if you look at that supplement facts label, they're all synthetic vitamins, and the minerals are ground up rock. Literally ground up rock.
Chalk and stuff like that.
Right?
Magnesium
Your
oxide,
body cannot
calcium
use
carbonate.
this stuff. You end up excreting it all. It's one of the vitamin commercials that I love, because they actually have no idea what they've done. But there is a cheap multivitamin called Centrum.
I know it.
And I hope these guys don't sue me because of this podcast. But this commercial actually has a I don't know what you call it, but the image of a person, a man or a woman, all made out of vitamin pills, right? And I'm going, that's exactly what happens when you use a supplement like that. It ends up just vitamin pills that you end up crapping out or excreting in urine, and your system cannot use these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, this cannot be emphasized enough, the importance of a high quality vitamin, high quality chelated minerals, and non-rock minerals so that was really, really valuable for folks, and I think this podcast will make a great reference. I'm going to write up some good show notes there for folks, maybe even turn it into an article and link to your website. I think that will really, really go well with this discussion. But okay, tell me now, so you also said AlphaGPC would be one of your top 5. Can you tell folks what is the difference between AlphaGPC and CDP choline, and what is the importance of choline for brain function?
That's a good question. I actually have this in pretty exquisite detail on several, actually 2 or 3 different articles. on Nootropics Expert. And if you, I've got one article called "The Advanced Guide to Acetylcholine Supplements and Nootropic Stacks."
Mm-hmm. And maybe
Did my camera just shut off?
No, still see you.
Okay.
Maybe preamble the choline discussion with acetylcholine. This it's not a well-known neurotransmitter like dopamine, serotonin. So maybe let's preamble what's up with acetylcholine. Why is it so important for memory, learning, focus, and why do we want to boost it?
Probably the simplest way to think about acetylcholine is when you move your arm or you move your leg or you move your lips, that signal comes from acetylcholine. And it works the same way in your brain, except you don't have muscles in your brain, but you have nerve cells in your brain, and those nerve cells are called neurons. And so rather than moving a muscle in your brain, it actually helps the rest of your brain with brain cell signaling. And a lack of acetylcholine, you'll suffer from learning and memory problems. Autopsies of Alzheimer's patients, for example. One of the big problems with Alzheimer's is a lack of acetylcholine, which is the reason why one of the drugs that they use for treating Alzheimer's is an inhibitor of acetylcholinesterase. And acetylcholinesterase is the enzyme that degrades acetylcholine once your brain uses it under normal conditions.
Right.
But in unique conditions where you want to boost the acetylcholine that's already in your brain but is not being used by your brain, if you inhibit that enzyme, it forces that acetylcholine out into the extracellular space so that your brain can use it.
Right.
And so let's we'll talk about the two main ones that I recommend are AlphaGPC and CDP choline. AlphaGPC is hang on for a second. It increases acetylcholine production by the activation of a thing called a protein called choline acetyltransferase, and it increases glucose uptake in your brain. That process of more acetyl-CoA is used in the production of acetylcholine. And when you take AlphaGPC as a supplement, it goes directly to your brain and starts to help in the production of making acetylcholine. Right. CDP choline is a little bit different because it, let me look at my notes for this, because when you swallow a capsule of CDP choline, when it gets into your digestive system, it separates into choline and uridine. And then when it gets to your brain, it's converted back into CDP choline.
Right.
And that CDP choline then throws off a choline molecule for the synthesis of acetylcholine. Now, the added benefit of using CDP choline rather than AlphaGPC is with the citidine, because citidine can convert into uridine, which is critical in your brain because uridine is needed in the synthesis of phosphatidylserine, which, if you remember, is one of the important phospholipids that keeps our brain cell membranes healthy.
Yeah.
Right? AlphaGPC, on the other hand, it occurs naturally if you don't take it as a supplement, it still occurs in your brain. It naturally occurs as a byproduct of phosphatidylcholine. So when your brain needs more choline, the choline floating around in your brain is running low. It breaks down phosphatidylcholine from cell membranes. It turns it into AlphaGPC so that it can be used to make acetylcholine. So your body and brain love it when you use AlphaGPC because it doesn't have to cannibalize its own cells to get more choline.
Regarding AlphaGPC and acetylcholine, would you say it would be more beneficial to take, instead of 500 milligrams of either one, would it be better to combine, let's say, 250 milligrams of alpha GPC and 250 milligrams of acetyl-choline and take that every day, rather than only buying one product and sticking with one product?
That's a good question. It depends. It really depends on the person, because my experience has been that some people have more success with AlphaGPC and other people have more success with acetylcholine. I personally find that both work for me. But each of them contribute to making acetylcholine, but they come in different parts of the pathway. And so I get my CDP choline from MindLab Pro, which I use every day. And then I have a separate AlphaGPC supplement. But if somebody wanted to do that, sure, you just cut back your dose to half of what you would normally do for each one and use both of them. It is possible to make too much acetylcholine, which is not helpful, but you have to use it more than once a day, because the half-life on this stuff is only a few hours. And so if you want the full benefit of either one of these supplements, it's best to take a dose in the morning, another dose at noon, and then if you want to be good for the rest of the late afternoon and into the evening, another dose around 4 o'clock.
Interesting. I didn't know that. So would you then, let's say I have an interview with you at about 3-4 in the afternoon, at what point would it be optimal to take my CDP choline, would you say?
About a half an hour before the interview.
So that quick, so it metabolizes that quickly, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's really good information. Thank you so much. I mean, like already this interview is like, I will certainly be taking copious notes when I'm writing them up. Let's talk a little bit now for the other supplement you mentioned, which is acetyl-l-carnitine. What is the rationale behind including that in your top 5 that you mentioned earlier?
There's 2 things that it does. One is L-carnitine is a cofactor in the synthesis of acetylcholine.
Right.
So you need the L-carnitine, except that L-carnitine can't cross the blood-brain barrier. So we use acetyl-l-carnitine, which can cross the blood-brain barrier.
Right.
So we need it to make acetylcholine. But the other thing that it does several other things, but the other main thing that it does is it helps transport fatty acids into mitochondria, where they're used to make ATP or adenosine triphosphate. And then once the fuel is made, it transports the oxidized garbage back out of the cell, or back out of the mitochondria. So it helps going in and it helps coming out. If you take a look at a really good energy supplement, for example, you'll often find that it's got 750 milligrams of acetyl-l-carnitine, or L-car for short, lipoic acid or alpha-lipoic acid or R-lipoic acid, which also contributes to making adenosine triphosphate, and CoQ10 and PQQ. That's a potent, really, those 4 supplements right there together provide a nice, clean energy boost.
Interesting.
It's not like drinking a Red Bull or a cup of coffee, because you're making more adenosine triphosphate in mitochondria, which is your most fundamental source of energy, yeah? That's where your cells get their energy from, is the adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, that's produced in mitochondria. So if you've got more mitochondria, that's good. And if the mitochondria that you do have are working properly to produce that fuel, that's good. There are several diseases that are attributed to mitochondrial dysfunction. And one of those dysfunctions is not being able to produce enough adenosine triphosphate.
Absolutely. And the other thing about a nice, clean energy stack like that, if you can feel the boost of energy, that means that things like your gut are working better, like definitely your brain is working better. Any time you improve mitochondrial function, pretty much, because we need energy to do any function in the body, whether that's the immune system.
Mitochondria is in every single cell in your body.
Yeah. Exactly.
But the thing is that there's more mitochondria in each brain cell and in your heart than in the rest of your body. Your brain cell, each brain cell might have 1,000 mitochondria in it, and other cells in your body might have a couple. But it really does. It affects the system wide.
Mm. Let's talk about another supplement that I am recommending pretty much to anyone, everybody, and that is creatine. Now, can you tell us what benefits does creatine have for cognitive function, for mental performance?
Creatine is involved in um, adenosine triphosphate or ATP production. So creatine as a nootropic, it actually recharges adenosine triphosphate, which is directly involved in things like producing, packaging, and secreting neurotransmitters. And so the real world value of that is a boost in things like intelligence and better memory. It facilitates faster thinking and it improves mood.
Mm,
And so creatine actually helps fuel adenosine triphosphate
that's awesome.
in your brain. Creatine is stored in your body as creatine phosphate or phosphocreatine, and it's critical for creating adenosine triphosphate, which is synthesized in mitochondria. Um, so ATP is your primary energy molecule that's used in your cells as energy. It's your body's natural fuel source, but ATP is broken down to produce the biochemical. So when ATP is broken down, it produces biochemical energy throughout your body, including your brain cells. But during this chemical process, ATP loses one of its phosphate molecules
Mm,
and is changed into adenosine diphosphate or ADP. And this is where creatine steps in. So remember that creatine is stored in your body as creatine phosphate. It
mhm.
recharges adenosine diphosphate by donating a phosphate molecule to ADP, which produces more ATP or adenosine triphosphate, can be used to make more energy.
Right, right. So taking 3 to 5 grams a day, basically most people, it will take a while to saturate their cells with creatine, and it's literally just your maintenance dose. There's probably, unless you want to have some bodybuilding goals, there's probably no reason to stack it, do those early protocols where you do 5 days of 20 grams per day. There's probably no need to do that, right? For
I don't
cognitive.
think there is. The recommended nootropic dosage for creatine is 5 grams a day. And the form to buy too, there's all kinds of creatine supplements on the market. You've got creatine nitrates and ethyl esters and malate and HCLs
Yeah.
and others. And I just tell people stick with creatine monohydrate in
Yep.
powder form,
Yep.
just the most
I think
basic form.
as long as it's the micronized CreaPure monohydrate, I think that's the best one. The most research has been done on that one.
And as a dietary source, you get creatine from wild game, and other sources include red meat and certain fish.
Mm. So it's especially important for vegetarians, vegans.
Yeah,
I would say. Yeah.
absolutely true.
Let's move on to. I don't think any discussion of nootropics would be complete unless we cover the racetam family. Can you give folks an overview of what are racetams and how can they make part of a really solid nootropic stack?
Well, you don't need racetams to make a really good nootropic stack, but they do help. Where the racetams come from is back in 1963, there was a Romanian biochemist named Dr. Cornelius Gheorghiu, and he developed piracetam. And so it's considered the very first nootropic that was ever developed. It was synthesized by Dr. Gheorghiu at UCB Pharma in 1964. And so piracetam is a cyclic derivative of GABA, right? And Dr. Gheorghiu intended this first nootropic to be a calming type of drug for motion sickness. I think it was because early days in the cosmonaut program, but it turns out that's not what happened. Instead, Dr. Gugaya found that piracetam was able to boost cognition even in healthy people.
Mm-hmm.
And it works by modulating AMPA and NMDA receptors in your brain, which increases the effectiveness of glutamate. And that improves the flow of acetylcholine and sensitivity and density of acetylcholine receptors. And it increases cerebral blood flow, or your brain's blood flow.
Right.
And so then that was the start. It wasn't called nootropics yet at that stage. It was just piracetam was a compound that Dr. Gugaya had invented in the lab, but it took off. And people in Russia and other European countries started using it very successfully in treating various diseases. And so labs around the world started monkeying around with that core that the racetams are made from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And since then, there's probably 24 racetams. And here in America and most Western countries, there's 7 racetams that are considered nootropics that are fairly widely used. They include piracetam, aniracetam, coluracetam, nephiracetam, oxiracetam, phenylpiracetam, and pramiracetam.
Mm-hmm.
And so then where the word nootropic came from was because this class of drugs started to take off, Dr. Gugaya decided that he was going to he was going to name this class of drugs. And he came up with the word nootropic, which comes from the Greek nou for mind and tropein, to bend, so to bend the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So the word nootropic was coined in 1973. Right. And then aniracetam is my favorite one. It was invented at Hoffmann La Roche in Germany in 1978. And it's a fat-soluble ampakine nootropic, like most of them are ampakine nootropics. And aniracetam boosts brain cell signaling by increasing the effectiveness of glutamate, which helps focus and concentration. Aniracetam helps release 200 to 300% more acetylcholine in your brain,
Mm-hmm.
which helps with focus, clarity of thought, memory, and recall. And it seems to have an effect on dopamine and serotonin receptors in your brain as well. Right. And so it distinguishes itself from the rest of the racetams as acting more as an effective anxiolytic. So I use it for 2 reasons. 1, because it's an anxiolytic or anti-anxiety. And 2, I find that my thought is more fluid and it's fast. I use it, for example, just before this podcast. I took about 1,000 milligrams with some AlphaGPC
as well, actually.
Pardon?
Funny enough, I also took some before we started.
There you go. So we're both on aniracetam.
Yeah.
So and then there's coluracetam. Now each of these racetams work differently, right? Coluracetam it boosts your brain's ability to convert choline to acetylcholine through the high affinity choline uptake process, or HACU process, which leads to better learning and memory. The reason why it was named coluracetam is not only does it affect cognition, but it also seems to affect color perception.
Interesting.
And when you use it, colors are much more vivid and vibrant.
So maybe good for artists?
Yeah, it'd be fantastic for artists.
Graphic designers? Wow.
And then there's nephiracetam. Oxiracetam seems to be a popular one. It was developed in 1977. It enhances choline acetyltransferase in your brain, which makes more acetylcholine. It helps with things like short-term memory and long-term memory and eliminating brain fog. And oxiracetam also seems to help mood. And then phenylpiracetam was created by adding a phenyl group to piracetam by Russian scientists in 1983 to boost the physical and mental performance of cosmonauts during space flight. And it's currently used by Russian cosmonauts on the International Space Station. It turns out that phenylpiracetam is very effective in boosting athletic performance. It provides significant stimulatory effects. and it helps you to resist the cold. So the World Anti-Doping Agency has banned phenylpiracetam for athletes in the Olympics and other professional sports.
Wow.
And then the last one on the list is pramiracetam. That was first synthesized by scientists at Park Davis in the late 1970s. It too boosts high affinity choline uptake, which was found to have a profound effect on the synthesis of acetylcholine. Unlike some of the other racetams, pramiracetam does not directly influence GABA, dopamine, or norepinephrine or serotonin in your brain. So it's not a good choice if you're looking to improve things like mood and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But many neurohackers report that pramiracetam quickly provides an intense increase in focus, and for some even a boost in confidence. So it's reported to be great for intense, long study sessions, for example, or when you face logical, attention-based tasks where you need really sharp focus. And others report improved recall, fluidity of thought, and ease of verbal communication and numerical calculations. So the question is, which racetam is best for you?
That's what I was going to ask.
Right. Well, each of the racetams share I can't even pronounce it, pyrrolidone nucleus core. And some have similarities like boosting acetylcholine and modulating glutamate in your brain. But each racetam also has a unique mechanism of action, providing its unique benefits. Now, all of these are considered non-toxic and safe to use if you follow the dosage recommendations. So if you're just starting out and you want to try something safe, you might want to try piracetam.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, that you need a lot of it for it to work. Like the recommended dosage is 1,600 milligrams 3 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a student, you might want to try nephiracetam or oxiracetam or pramiracetam. And aniracetam, I love because it's a very effective anxiolytic, and it helps relieve anxiety and depression.
So I've only tried personally piracetam, I love, and aniracetam, and I think for me piracetam for things like verbal fluency, for talking. So if you're presenting or things like that, even though it's the first one, the least strong in terms of dose you need to take. I take maybe 2 a day, so that's like up to 2,400 milligrams. But I find it really, really useful. Have you tried, other than aniracetam, what other nootropics have you tried? Which other racetams have you tried, David? And what's kind of your qualitative, opinion of them or experience?
I've tried several of them. One I can remember trying because I was really curious is phenylpiracetam, the one that's banned by the Olympics. And I can't use it. I don't know what it is about that particular racetam, but I reacted not really negatively badly to it, but I just didn't feel good. And I knew instantly that it wasn't the racetam for me.
Yeah.
I think I've tried coluracetam and oxiracetam at some stage, but I can't remember what happened with those. But I just remember that, I've been using aniracetam every single day for the last 12 years.
Wow. And what's your dosage?
I use 1,000 milligrams twice a day.
Okay.
Morning and noon. Or if there's a special occasion like a podcast, I'll take 1,000 milligrams right before the podcast. But remember, these things are fat soluble and they boost acetylcholine. So the two things you have to do if you're using a racetam, or it's not going to work. You've got to use a choline supplement like AlphaGPC or CDP choline. So, for example, if you're using 750 milligrams as a standard dose for aniracetam, you would take 300 milligrams of alpha-GPC or CDP choline, and you need a fat source because it's fat soluble. And that's the reason why you see some supplement labels saying, take this with a meal.
Right.
Or some take it with water. They say take it with a meal because the assumption is that you'll have healthy fats in that meal that will, what happens is fat in the meal or fat from something like, I use a tablespoon of unrefined coconut oil or MCT oil, works just as
Hmm.
good, but it activates certain enzymes produced by your pancreas in your gut so that you can break down the fats so that they can get into your bloodstream so they can be used.
Interesting.
So if you don't have a fat source, it's just going to be excreted out. And if you
So I
don't
think
use
I've
a
been doing
choline
it wrong.
supplement, you'll end up with a headache. It's called a racetam headache. So it's a
Yeah,
strange kind of
that's really
headache.
important information. Yeah, yeah. The choline sources, but why I think I'm using it wrong. I just wanted to mention this. I've been taking aniracetam sublingually, so under the tongue. Do you think I'm not optimizing my absorption that way? For
Probably
sure.
not.
Yeah. What if I have fats running in my system from a meal, let's say an hour or two ago? So I
It
have,
may.
yeah.
It may, but there are certain supplements that it makes a lot of sense to use sublingually. The
Hmm.
racetams are just not one of them.
Okay, I'll definitely try it a different way tomorrow and see if I'm assuming it will be different. With me, I'll take it with a bit of butter or MCT oil like you do.
MCT oil or unrefined coconut oil works great.
Okay. Yeah, I have both, so awesome. All right. Okay, what about any special mentions? What have we not covered that you are really fond of, David?
I think one really important one to talk about right now because of COVID-19 is quercetin.
Okay.
Because quercetin has been shown in clinical studies as well as practical use to reduce the symptoms of COVID-19,
I think I heard that
which is
before.
kind of a big deal during this
Yeah.
pandemic. Um,
Yeah.
just as a standard of what quercetin is it's a flavonol from the flavonoid group of polyphenols found in many different plants. So you can get quercetin from foods like capers and buckwheat and radish leaves and dill and cilantro and onions and radicchio. It's also found in some herbal nootropic supplements like ginkgo biloba in St. John's wort. So it's one of the most abundantly consumed flavonoids in your diet. It's estimated that the average person consumes anywhere from 0 to 30 milligrams of quercetin per day. But you need more than that if you want to get
How
a
much would
nootropic
you need?
benefit from it, or if you want to tame the symptoms of COVID-19.
And what would be the standard
A standard dose is
dosage range?
500 milligrams twice a day. And working with a doctor is best if you're dealing with something like COVID-19, up to 3 grams a day. How I found out about it is interesting. I went for just a physical checkup with a doctor here, Dr. Moskowitz, and a few weeks ago, and I just asked him about what his experience was with COVID-19. And his eyes lit up and he said, quercetin. And this guy, he brought out a file folder with a stack of loose leaf paper with handwritten notes. It was like looking at a clinical study in its raw form, before it was published. And he showed me of 18 of his patients that had COVID-19, 16 of them recovered within a couple of days of using 3 grams per day, along with vitamin C and zinc. And 2 of them died because they refused to take it.
Oh my God. What do you think is the mechanism that quercetin? It's a fat soluble compound, isn't it?
It's a fat soluble compound. It seems to, there was a Chinese study that was done that showed that quercetin bound with the spike protein in the coronavirus that reduced its ability to infect cells.
Interesting. I've heard a lot of good stuff about quercetin. It's actually like pretty high up on my list to, add to the supplement regime.
Well,
Which
before
is
COVID, it was used for by people that knew about it. I didn't even know about it, but people that knew about it use it for reducing blood pressure. It boosts immunity. It fights inflammation. It's really effective in combating allergies. Some people say that it's better than using prescription antihistamines.
wow.
I
That's
find
so good
that
to know.
since my wife used to complain about my snoring, and since I've started using quercetin, my snoring is not nearly as bad, she tells me.
Interesting.
And the other thing is I find that I can breathe easier and my lungs just feel clearer. Now, another thing that quercetin is unique in is that it helps heal a leaky brain or a leaky gut. It has the unique ability to increase claudin 4, which is one of the proteins that seals tight junctions. The epithelial lining of cells that line your blood vessels where you're trying to block stuff from your gut going into your bloodstream or block it from going into your bloodstream into your brain has a thing called, the technical term of it is called tight junction.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's called, tight junction. And tight junction is made up of a couple of proteins, and one of those is claudin 4. And if you don't have enough claudin 4, you end up with a leaky gut or a leaky brain. And if you increase claudin 4, you heal that tight junction, and you end up healing a leaky gut or a leaky blood-brain barrier.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
I will be doing a lot of, that's amazing. I'll be doing a lot of investigation into this because, you're not the only one that has a lot of good things to say about quercetin, especially about things like inflammation. But now this gut benefit that you just mentioned, that is absolutely incredible. So we'll definitely be investigating that.
Yeah.
What else would you?
It also helps. It helps prevent things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's as well too, and it boosts testosterone.
Come on.
Yeah.
Are you gonna tell me it does my taxes too?
It doesn't do your taxes. No, it won't bring you a cup of coffee. But there is an enzyme called UGT2B17. And it's an enzyme that converts testosterone and testosterone glucuronide, which is then excreted out of your body through urine. Quercetin has been shown to inhibit UGT2B17 activity by as much as 72% in lab studies, which means that supplementing with quercetin as a nootropic may slow down the excretion of testosterone and in turn boost blood levels of testosterone. And it inhibits aromatase, which is the enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen.
So it's an aromatase inhibitor. That's very, very interesting as well. Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to dig into this research. That is amazing. What other compounds should folks know about? I know there's a big list you have, but
yeah, there is. Well, you know what people can do if they go to nootropicsexpert.com. Pretty much everywhere you look, there's a box where you can sign up for my newsletter. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you can download a free copy of Secrets of the Optimized Brain, which is this list.
Mm-hmm.
And awesome. The third edition is out now, so you can download it as a PDF, but it's got the name of the supplement and basically why we use it as a nootropic, where it comes from, and dosage recommendations. So a little blurb on each supplement. So it's got 92, I think, nootropics in this book. It's a really valuable little book, and you get it for free.
Yeah.
So, with dopamine, the easiest way to raise dopamine is by L-tyrosine. One of the things that people forget with let's talk about serotonin for a minute. Serotonin is important because it's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It's got to be in balance with dopamine, and it makes you feel good, right? And people try to increase, and a lot of antidepressants work on as serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Yeah. And so their instinct is to use 5-HTP to boost serotonin, which is not a good idea because there is, the way it works is L-tryptophan to 5-HTP to serotonin to melatonin. Yeah. And I've found that when you use a direct precursor, it's a lot more difficult to control dosage. And clinical studies have shown that if you're trying to use 5-HTP for depression, it works like gangbusters for about 4 weeks, and then it stops working. But L-tryptophan does not do that. You take 500 milligrams of L-tryptophan before you go to sleep, It turns into, it helps, so it increases serotonin. It eventually turns into melatonin, so it helps you sleep and you feel good the next morning.
Why do you think that is, David?
I
Why does
think
the taking the 5-H?
my speculation in this case is that because serotonin and dopamine need to be in balance, if you're using high doses of 5-HTP, you increase serotonin so much that you depress dopamine.
Right. That makes sense. Oh, I've actually, yes, I have seen, I forgot the name of the doctors whose book I read, that he said he always gives 5-HTP with tyrosine together, because there's some mechanism where if you only add one, basically the other one is excreted somehow through the system. I forgot exactly what the mechanism.
They use the same enzyme for the conversion process. That's one thing.
Right.
But yeah, it's dopamine and serotonin. People get into trouble with this all the time. They boost serotonin too much, or they boost dopamine too much, and they can't figure out why they feel like crap. It works for a while, and all of a sudden it doesn't stop working, and they feel horrible. And the reason why is because things got out of whack. They're out of balance.
Yeah, 5-HTP is one supplement that I always tell people, listen, work with a practitioner, because there's certain people that just don't respond well to it. So like, I think that's probably even better than the case you were talking about, where folks, it works gangbusters for 4 weeks and then it doesn't. I think that's a more, that can cause harm more than you take it once, you feel crap, you stop taking it, you stay away from it.
Absolutely.
The other one, then it's difficult. You start trying to think, what could it be, and you won't think it's something you've been taking for the last 3-4 weeks, for example. I think that's important.
If it stops working, you try taking more.
Oh yes,
is what people typically do, and it just makes matters worse.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's very important. What about one favorite of mine is taurine. What would you use that cyclically or at all in your program?
I use taurine every day as an anti-aging supplement.
Really? Anti-aging?
Yeah. It functions as a neurotransmitter on its own, as a neuromodulator in your brain. So it is actually a neurotransmitter. Mm-hmm. It also activates GABA and glycine receptors, which affects memory and mood, and it prevents seizures. Taurine also protects brain cells by reducing intracellular free calcium concentrations.
Okay.
And it's a potent antioxidant. It protects from mitochondrial dysfunction. It modulates energy metabolism with cells. It modulates genes to induce longevity. It inhibits cellular stress associated with Alzheimer's, and it acts as a quality control in brain cell health, and it protects against stroke. Taurine also increases stem cells and progenitor cells in your brain, including your hippocampus, and it increases the survival of newborn neurons.
Wow.
So I've got clinical studies showing that taurine for autism, taurine helping ADHD, taurine for OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, and taurine for epilepsy.
That is awesome. Yeah, taurine. I will certainly not be. I was thinking of taking a break after the current packet. I buy it by the 0.5 kilogram. I was thinking of taking a break from it after the current one finishes, but I certainly will be ordering more of that stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to take a break. Most nootropics you don't need a cycle, or you don't need to take a break from, as long as you use recommended dosage.
Yes, that is so important.
Right?
Because it's easy to think that if something is good in X dose, then 2x that dose is going to be better. And there's definitely the diminishing return curve that a lot of these things have.
On nearly everything. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. And you're wasting money as well that way.
Yeah, and you're just not doing your health any favors.
Yeah. David, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I almost have a feeling that we barely scratched the surface here, even though we covered the most important things. I feel like maybe we could do another episode if you
I think
want
we
at
should.
another point. And
Yeah.
I think there's so many more things we can cover. But before we go, please tell folks how they can find you on the internet, social media, plug any books or services you do, etc. Please.
Okay. You can just Google David Tomen, and I'm all over the front page of the search results. Or you can Google Nootropics or Nootropics Expert, or go directly to nootropicsexpert.com.
I'll have the links there.
And the same thing with YouTube. I've got a very active YouTube channel that just start in the search box at YouTube, start typing in Nootropics, and Nootropics Expert should pop up to the top.
Nice.
I've got 65 or 70,000 subscribers on the website. And I've got, I think, 120 videos on that channel. So there's hours and hours and hours of videos if you prefer videos over reading. On the website, there are links to the free download for Secrets of the Optimized Brain, which is a nice little freebie to have. And I have a book called Head First. Head First is like a manual for your brain. It's almost 600 pages.
Wow.
And for now, it's only available in digital form. It's available for Kindle or iPad, or you can download it as a PDF if you want. But it's the first book published on nootropics like it since 1992. So the feedback on it has been really good. I'm working on the second edition now, and I'm not sure when that'll come out. Hopefully in the first or the second quarter, probably the second quarter of this year. But it's worth. People tell me that it's worth having. I also do personal consultations for people that are having problems trying to figure this stuff out on their own, or they just want to. And this could be somebody who's completely new to nootropics, or I have geeks that have been using this stuff for decades, and they just want input on a new way of looking at it, or some help tweaking their stack. So I do 1 hour consultations is probably the most effective. We can't cover enough in a half an hour, but 1 hour is best. So that's available for people.
That's awesome.
And there is a Facebook page too that is not terribly active because I don't spend enough time on it. As soon as I hire myself a social media manager, that will change. But YouTube and the website are the biggest ones right now. And I've got sign up. When you sign up, I've got a newsletter that comes out 2 or 3 times a week.
Great. Yeah, I signed up earlier today, so I'm looking forward to digging into that guide. And I'll certainly be getting this book. And you will be coming out with a paperback or hardcover.
The second edition will be a hardcover or a paperback. The book is so useful that I wouldn't wait for it. Get the digital copy, but that my intention is I'm working with a publisher right now so that it will be a hardcover version in the next edition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the books that I just want as a reference on my bookshelf as well.
It's not meant to be read cover to cover. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'll have all the links to your books, to your YouTube channel, to your website, etc. For folks, I'm sure many people listening will be checking that out. And I'm really looking forward to connecting with you again in the future and discussing maybe specific topics. We could maybe we don't even have to go for a full hour per topic, but if we do like 30-40 minutes for a specific topic, let's say brain fog or anxiety, etc., I feel like there's so much value we can provide there that it would be unethical and a crime not to do it, basically.
Well, let's do it then.
Awesome. David, once again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Christian. It was a fantastic and a pleasure meeting you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to Connecting Minds. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and found it interesting, illuminating, or inspiring. For episode show notes, links, and further information on our guests, please visit christianyordanov.com. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with someone who might also enjoy it. Thank you for being here.